There have been many crazy what-ifs throughout the long history of the NBA. For example, it's pretty well documented that Tim Duncan nearly joined Tracy McGrady on the Orlando Magic. If you've been around NBA YouTube very long, then you know very well that Michael Jordan and Hakeem Olajuwon nearly became teammates as rookies and would have had Clyde Drexler alongside of them as well. And then of course, possibly the greatest what if in NBA history is what if Len Bias had lived, a player who seemed destined to be a rival to Michael Jordan just like he was in college, and he would have been joining a Boston Celtics team that was already a championship contender. But even with all that being the case, there are still plenty of other great what ifs, and some of them are not just underrated, but are extremely unknown. Today, we're looking at some of those significant but under-recognized what-ifs of NBA history, and let me know in the comments if you think there are some other ones that are worth recognizing. So without further ado, let's get into it. First off, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the New York Knicks in 1974. As we all know, Kareem is one of, if not the greatest center in NBA history, and he won a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks, before eventually going to the Los Angeles Lakers where he won 5 more rings. The thing is, that easily could have been New York instead of Los Angeles, because in September of 1974, his famous co-star for the Bucks, Oscar Robertson, retired, and afterwards, Kareem was unable to negotiate a new contract with the Milwaukee Bucks. He had grown frustrated with the situation and was ready to head to a new direction. It was at that point in October of 1974 that Kareem requested a trade, and he had a list of desired destinations. The first destination of choice was the New York Knicks, and his second choice was the Washington Bullets, and the third was the Los Angeles Lakers. Months passed, and later on in March of 1975, Kareem once again stated that he would like to be traded, but this time his preferred list had shrunk to just the New York Knicks or the Lakers, but preferably he wanted to go to New York. As you all know, eventually the trade materialized, but he was sent to Los Angeles, forever changing the course of history for Lakers basketball. But just take a moment and imagine if he had gone to New York instead. Willis Reed had just recently retired from the NBA, but with that being said, New York still had multiple stars and MVP candidates, in Walt Frazier and Earl the Pearl Monroe. So they had their perimeter locked down that made them a decent team, but what they needed was a superstar big man. And Kareem would have came in immediately and would have made them not only title contenders, but probably title favorites in what was an extremely competitive 1970s decade. One can only imagine how much the GOAT argument changes, how much legacies change, and how the perspectives of both the Knicks and the Lakers organization change if Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had gone to his preferred destination instead. The next what if is Dominique Wilkins to the Los Angeles Lakers in the 1982 NBA draft. The Lakers had the first overall pick in that draft, and with it, they took big game James Worthy, who was a forward out of the University of North Carolina. Now Worthy was certainly a great acquisition for the Lakers and helped them go on to win multiple championships. In many ways, he was also the ideal running mate for Magic Johnson, as his speed and finishing ability made him a tremendous threat in transition. But even with all that in mind, Dominique Wilkins is simply one of the greatest scorers in the history of the league, and went on to be a franchise cornerstone for the Atlanta Hawks. He ended up being the 3rd overall pick, but if the Lakers had taken Dominique instead, then that likely would have translated to some of the greatest highlight reels that we had ever seen. Just imagine Magic Johnson leading the Showtime offense, throwing lob passes to Dominique Wilkins. Imagine how many fast break plays would have ended with 360s, windmills, and ferocious dunks. It would have been some of the most fascinating basketball that we've ever seen. And on top of that, I think the Lakers dynasty becomes even better, seeing how Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, and Dominique Wilkins were all capable of leading teams to be contenders. Arguably, it would have been the strongest and most intimidating three-headed monster of all time. But again, I honestly think the most unfortunate thing about it not happening is all the highlights that we didn't get. Next is Magic Johnson to the Chicago Bulls. Many years ago, the NBA draft had very different rules. And one of those rules was that the worst team in the Western Conference and the worst team in the Eastern Conference would have the first overall pick decided by a coin flip. At the time, the New Orleans Jazz were the worst in the West, while the Chicago Bulls were the worst in the East. But the thing is, the Los Angeles Lakers had the rights to the New Orleans Jazz pick because of a previous trade, and leading the rookie class that season was none other than Earvin Magic Johnson, meaning that the future of the Bulls organization, the Lakers organization, and one of the greatest players of all time all ended up being determined by a coin flip. The Chicago Bulls made the call, and they called tails, and it ended up being heads, solidifying Magic's future as a Los Angeles Laker. Now, what if Magic had ended up on the Bulls instead? This changes so much. The formation of the Showtime Lakers never happens. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar surely ends up with less championships on his resume, with a lack of Magic Johnson by his side. Larry Bird probably ends up with way more championships now that he doesn't have Magic Johnson on a stacked Lakers team in his path. Although, we would have had a lot more battles between Magic and Bird, seeing that now they would both be in the Eastern Conference. And probably the biggest ripple effect is the fact that if Magic Johnson is on the Chicago Bulls since 1979, then they're probably not bad enough to have the third overall pick in the 1984 NBA draft, which means they're never in a position to take Michael Jordan in the first place. This single what if changes the trajectory and the history of the most prestigious NBA franchises of all time. And it also changes the legacies of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Michael Jordan. 4 different GOAT candidates all end up with a much different career, all because of a coin flip. So now you've heard my choices for the most underrated what ifs in NBA history. What are yours? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching as always. Make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.